Cool. Awesome. Thank you all for coming to this meeting. And just before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owned custodians of this land. We acknowledge the many nations of Tasmanian Aboriginal people across Lutruwita, Truanina, Tasmania, whose stories date back to the time immemorial. Each had their own language, law, lifestyle, and deep spiritual connection to land, sea, and sky. From the Kamanaluka, Tamar River to Tabrakuna, Cape Portland, from Takena, the Tarkine to Lunauna, Alona, Bruny Island. From Truana, Cape Barren Island to Flinders Island on Tayaritia, Bass Strait Islands, this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We recognize the Palawa people as the traditional owners and custodians of Lutruwita, Truana. We also acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners of the land on which our Roselle campus in New South Wales stands. We honor the enduring cultural practices of First Nations people, which continue today with strength, pride, and resistance. We recognize the colonization brought profound and ongoing harm, including dispossession, violence, and the suppression of culture, language, and identity. The university sector, including student organizations like ours, has been complicit. The Tasmanian University Student Association now commits to truth-telling, listening, and action. We acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people have always been here, with vibrant identities, thriving cultures, and unbroken connections to country. We pay our deepest respects to elders past and present, and to emerging leaders who carry forward stories, connections, languages, and renewal. So thank you for coming to our last ExecuLearn session 4, how to run a proper meeting. We sort of had to postpone it just for a lot of reasons, but also because it is coming to this point where a lot of clubs are starting to think about their future and also thinking about running their next annual general meeting to elect new executive members. So this is a very timely session for that, but also we do go into a complementary but deep dive into running meetings in our upcoming Student Leaders Conference on the 18th and 19th of November this year. But for those of you watching, this is sort of like helps you with that, to think about that, but also, yeah, so that way, if you're going to run it before November, this is a tool that will help you. So I guess firstly, and also this is going to be, so email us if you're watching this online. You can email us if you have any more questions. But for those in the room, feel free to leave a message or put it on chat, and we'll talk you through them. But firstly, why do we run meetings? So I guess for those in the room, if you want to respond, let us know. Why do we run meetings? All right, I guess I'll answer that. So one of the reasons we run meetings is plenty of reasons why we do that would be because of communication, decision making, planning, implementing those plans. So this is not just related to like an annual general meeting, ones that you only do once a year, but this is just in general. We run meetings for these reasons, so that way we can communicate that information to all of your members, your executives, especially when you're running things or when you're amending something that governs your. There's a lot of reasons why we run those meetings. We have these meeting types. They could be broken down into 4 things. So an annual general meeting, a special general meeting, an inaugural general meeting, and a general meeting. The most common ones you'll find would be, especially for an existing club, would be the AGM, the SGM, and the GM. So annual general meeting, which we'll quickly go through these. The reason why is because an inaugural general meeting is only something you'll find if you were starting a new club. Well, we'll just go through this. So an annual general meeting, it's a yearly gathering of all of your members, not just your committee. You can only hold it once a year, and the purpose of it is to review your overall performance for the club, discuss like important stuff, race matters, important concerns. It's also where you elect your new committee, and where you amend your governing documents, like your constitution, if you have any, and also like other applicable businesses as well. Um, so with AGMs, you need to invite everyone. I could see that it's still common practice for some clubs to only send out the invites to their executive committee or just the committee, the working parties, not members who are part of your club or who have only purchased your membership but have not gone to your events, or you know, like ones who aren't as active. That's not the case. You should always invite your all of your members for that year. And normally, because you maintain your membership list as we expect of you, you maintain them through Rubric. Um, you need to like download all of them and email all of them. Like especially if you've already been sending out newsletters, they all need to be sent, especially for an AGM. The reason for that is because it's a once in a year thing. You talk about all of the important stuff, and you talk about um, elections, especially, which needs to be fair. And for it to be fair, everyone needs to be included. If you decide to exclude them, you risk running conflicts. Like, for example, someone wasn't invited and they didn't know about it, or even if you did invite them but they didn't know about it, um, you run the risk of a conflict. And so, as much as possible, you try to communicate that, and you do it really early, especially for something as important as an AGM, where 7-day notice for running things may or may not suffice. Just depends on how active your committees are, or how active your members are, or your clubs are. But generally speaking, best practice is when you're notifying someone of an annual general meeting, you do it really early, 7 days or more, and you also attach an agenda, which goes through, like, it's just a bit of a short notice or note to state that these are the stuff that we're gonna go through, and like what we're gonna discuss. But yeah, case in point is all these financial statements. The treasurer delivers the statements. You elect the new committee, you amend documents and other business. A special general meeting is something that you can call outside of your regular annual or periodic meetings. So because an annual general meeting is only something you could run once a year, if you do need to make an important decision, you can run it through a special general meeting. You discuss to vote on urgent or significant issues that need immediate attention or arise between regular meetings. So, for example, let's say you ran an AGM to elect your new committee. So you had a president, secretary, and treasurer, but then in your committee, but you only filled two of them, so you were missing one. Uh, and so you can approve that AGM on the basis that it's the true and accurate record of that meeting. But then because you still need to fill in the third slot, and you found someone that is interested in running for it, you can run a special general meeting to elect that new person. However, it needs to be motioned and voted in to make sure that it is fair. So in that case, when you run your special general meeting, you still need to email out to all of your members to say we're running it at this date, and then you meet your quorum. And so one thing I would advise is that for any meeting, you need to have quorum. So your quorum is dictated in your constitution and tells you like how many minimum do you need to run. Most constitutions nowadays would say something like 10 minimum members or 10% of your um, total number of members. So either say 10 minimum or 10%. So if you have 50 members, then you could have five. But ideally, um, it needs to have enough people in order to run something valid like an SGM. AGMs, you should have more. Um, unless you're a really small society where you're not valid to affiliate, you should be aiming for 10. at the very least, because these are voting on very special general matters. So if you have less than that, you need to recall like another date to run your meeting. Don't just run it with like handful of you, because that's not going to be valid, and you might risk um, with something invalid and conflict as well. But yeah, with an SGM, you can run something similar, like amending your documents, major club decisions, fairly similar to an AGM, but you don't have to talk about all of these if you only got one thing. So at the special general meeting, ideally, just talk about that one thing when you run that meeting for something to vote on. You can talk about other things, but with an SGM, normally you focus on that one topic for voting to motion to say, yes, we're going to vote for this person, or change the constitution. It needs to be as fair as a special general meeting or as an AGM. Now, for an just to also go through the IGM, just quite quickly, it's only for those who are for clubs that are new. So you adopt everything. There's nothing else apart from adopting the constitution that you send us and we approve, plus also electing who your president, secretary, and treasurers are. You can run this IGM with just the 5 members or whoever is starting, and you clearly notified everyone. And then you also discuss like, oh, here are our memberships and here are our goals and objectives, which are dictated in your constitution. So it's something you all will ever only run once, and then that's it. So for the entire existence of your club, you'll only have ever run an IGM once. If the yearly election is going to be an annual general meeting, otherwise you run it through an SGM. So if you've already elected someone for an AGM, because you only run it once a year, it's an SGM after that. So I guess for those of you watching who have done AGMs in the middle of the year, when you've already done one earlier in the year, it's an SGM. You can't call it an annual general meeting. That would be misleading, because then you'll have two documents that say AGM. That's not valid. It has to be AGM and then SGM. So in terms of governance, the key for effective governance is to save time and make it easier for you to have your records intact. And so whenever you run a meeting, there will always be a chair and a note taker. The chair is the person who runs the meeting. It's up to them to keep the meeting on track and set the motions in place. Whilst it could be anyone in your executive committee, it's usually the president who chairs. So when I say this about the chairing position, so the priority would always be the president to chair the meeting, to run the meeting. In the case that the president is not present to chair something, then it would be the vice president. If you don't have a vice president in your committee, it would be the treasurer. And then if not, then it's other positions in the executive. But ideally, if it's gonna be like treasurer or the other positions in the executive, you need to have like written notice to say that an apology from the president that they couldn't conduct and that they were happy to um, leave or delegate the chairing of the meeting to this other person, to this other executive committee member. But you also need to meet your quorum when you run those meetings. Otherwise, it would not be valid. And the reason we say this and the reason why we restrict on this is because it then becomes an issue later, become an issue later on, where anyone could just literally run a meeting and then they validate it and then it becomes an issue. So it's a screening process about why we have these things, because otherwise you risk just having a separate group of people just say, oh, yep, we'll run this meeting, and then this will say that this is valid. And in terms of like changing signatories or whoever, like especially back then where we didn't have a CRM in place to have these, it could become an issue. But thankfully with that CRM, you know, unless you're sharing login details or something like that, shouldn't really be an issue. So at meetings, when you got someone taking notes, it's usually the secretary that does this. They need to capture the motions, who said what, who is doing what, and any other information that was communicated at the meeting. Um, so when we run a meeting, we use Robert's Rules of Order to help maintain the clarity, fairness of this decision making. That means you need to motion in each of your meeting minutes. You need to motion. You need to write the minutes who motioned for this change and who seconded it. You also need to write who abstained and or how many abstained and also how many have voted against something, and whether the entire decision has been carried or not. And you need to do this for every change required. So if you're electing this you need person, then you need to motion for it. If you want a change in the constitution, it needs to be motioned who carried, whether it was carried, who voted, abstained, that sort of stuff like that, so that it's very clear. And the other thing that would be something that isn't necessarily written explicitly but is actually good practice would be if let's say I'm at an AGM or I'm at an SGM, and what it I say something that is not in the agenda. Good practice would be to ask that the note taker would need to ask this person, do you want me to minute what you said in the meeting minutes? It's a form of consent, but also it's practice for Robert's Rules of Order, because you can't just like write exactly what that person says verbatim. um, if unless they've actually said yes, you could write this at the meeting minutes, or you could write a summary of what I said in the meeting minutes. Because otherwise, if you just write everything, um, there might be issues with some consensual stuff, but also um, you risk writing a really long meeting minutes um, document when it's not necessarily have something that big. So the meeting cycle would normally run like this. Standard one, whether it's an AGM or an SGM. You organize a meeting. There are several outlets where you could do that, like Doodle Poll is a good one. You could email this out to your members and you could tick about availabilities and like who is available. And you could schedule your meeting minutes through there. You've also got a when and where online document, like a Zoom link. You could email them all that stuff. So you could find that in there. There's also the secretary. So you invite your members, the secretary invites your members, calls on them for items to report and include in their agenda, then writes the agenda, circulates it by email, other preferred email, usually best practice 7 days or more. Then at the meeting, the president or whoever the chair is then opens the meeting, does the acknowledgement of country, welcomes them, reads out the minutes agenda to say like who's an apology, who's absent, and who's an observer. Then provides all that welcome. Then you go through the motions in the meeting. Um, you gotta read them out, all the reports, especially like the president's report and the treasurer's report. You need to have them written out, but also you need to have them ideally presented, something like a visual cue, so that way everyone is clear and everyone's aware what was in place. And this is especially important for treasurer's report, because the treasurer's report, they need to be aware what they are motioning for. So for example, if you say these are our expenditures for the year, this is what we've spent on, and this is what we have left in the bank, and they're motioning for that, they need to be aware that actually your transactions make sense, and so we'll say that yes, this is true and accurate, and therefore when the committee comes back to TUSA and reports their financial, as we always do, financial auditing for the year. They are aware that they're taking on what they've said is true and accurate. Because part of what we have in our constitution is that the the incoming committee won't be liable for the debts incurred by the previous committee unless they knowingly accept those debts. Um, and so the issue still will still remain with, let's say you had an unsettled debt. It doesn't mean that it becomes the new committee's responsibility. It's still your outgoing committee's responsibility. And so you need to make sure that everything that they're going through is correct. Otherwise, it becomes a conflict where they say, I actually didn't know that this was a thing, or the treasurer's report was incorrect. So a lot of the time, like they need to um, they need to make sure that everything is minuted correctly, and they're aware of what they're taking. And then after that, you write your meeting minutes, and then you circulate that to all of your members. So that way, even if they're an apology or they're absent, that they are aware like what the stuff's missing, that sort of stuff like that. So this is a copy of the annual general meeting agenda. So like you've got this, you could find this in our website, and it's like in red text. So anything in red text you need to either change or you need to delete. But the acknowledgement of country, you leave that in there. You if you had your own one, you put it in there. You just that's there for you to have there. So when you circulate, and also for you to read out as well. Those ones like the club and society name at the top, you change to your own society. The blue there is instructions for you specifically, and then the rest of these are stuff that is also instructions for you, but also you need to change. For example, like the date, with the minutes and matters arising. Annual general meeting minutes, add date of previous AGM minutes. So you need to say the date of the last AGM. A lot of AGM minutes that Jess and I see a lot of the time is like they put the date that the current AGM is running. So if it's like if your meeting is running on the 29th of September, they also put in their 29th of September meeting. It's not that. It's supposed to be like the previous year's AGM. And then you attach any SGMs that are related to that as well, if there was any amendments to that. Um, Outside of that, that's what you put in there. You also need to put like nominations, the constitutional amendments if you had anything to change. But that's what it's basically about. So make sure you change the red writing to some of the different text, change them or delete them if it's not necessary. But everything else in black, you keep. So even if you don't have outward correspondence. You just keep it in there, put NA, remove all of the appendix. So you know how it says Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C, Appendix D. Delete them if you're not gonna attach them. But it's best practice that if it's related to something that you attach it. So President's report and Treasurer's report, you need to attach them in a document before you send them to us, because that way we know exactly what transpired at the meeting and everyone is aware that this is what we've got. It's not like it's secret. It'd be best for everyone to know, as a member of the club, that the executive is held liable and is responsible and held accountable for their expenditure and the financial sustainability of the club, um, as members. And it is an AGM. So this is an SGM template. It's almost exactly the same as an AGM. We just like a few couple of changes. It really depends on like what you need to talk about. Um, but one thing I didn't highlight is the general meeting. So general meeting is just to talk about random things or maybe talk about an event. So general meetings don't necessarily need to be provided to us like an SGM would, because an SGM normally you'd be making a change that's quite important, but falls outside of an annual general meeting. So let's say you have a mid-year election, then you run an SGM. If you want to change a constitution, um, like a clause in the constitution, you run an SGM. But if you're running any other kind of meeting, like say to talk about an event, or or because you want to have a sponsorship thing, then you could talk about it in a general meeting. Have something so that at least you could have a record of it. Or let's say your executive committee wants to talk about like uh, you know, a change in something that does not affect the constitution. It's a general meeting. But if you're adding something that would require change in the constitution, SGM. And so that's what this is. It varies on length. So with your minute writing, again, this is what the template is going to look like. You could find that information in our in our resources and info library on our website. It's fairly substantial, but again, it's hopefully it's not as overwhelming. You just need to delete a lot of those red texts are just a cue for you to delete or amend or yeah, do things with. We'll hopefully do, we won't do a mock meeting for this one just because we don't have enough people. But basically, just going through this Robert's rules, any action discussed must be presented as a motion. This is what I mentioned earlier. Only one person speaks at a time, and discussions must stay on topic of the motion. So you don't go on a tangent. Keep it, answer the question, only the question, and motion what depending on what topic you're in now. Your votes can be conducted by voice, like a yay or nay, or you could, raise your hand. You agree to this motion, or put your hand down. If not, you could do a written ballot as well, like anonymous ballot, and then you could count how many votes have been done. This depends really on like how formal you want it to be, and or how the meeting was going to be conducted, or how important the motions are, something like that. A member can propose changes to a motion. So if you want to change something, you have to say, I move to amend the motion to ... That way, the secretary or whoever the note taker is clear on what they are going to write. So a motion was done to do this and that. And always follow the established agenda. So whatever agenda has been circulated, you need to motion that. However, flexibility is allowed with a vote of the members. And part of the thing that is not written here that is also very important is, and this is for, I guess, certain clubs that have ex officio members, or those who are considered observers because they're not a member of the club. For those people, because they are observers, or because they are considered external to the club because they're not a student member or an associate member, but there's something else entirely, they would fall under observers, and which means that they can't speak at the meeting, they can't participate at the voting, they can't motion anything, and they can't really deliver a report unless the entire I guess attendees at that meeting, the executive, has allowed, like the chair, especially the chair, unless the chair has allowed for the observer or an external person to say something. That being said, an observer does not have voting power. They're limited to saying something that, that the secretary, they could write, yeah, to do something, but they can't motion anything. They can't vote on anything. The note taker has to then write on the meeting minutes to say, the chair of the meeting has allowed this observer, name of the person, to deliver this report or something that, like, something like that. Like, but it has to be explicitly written by the secretary in the meeting minutes, or the chair, or whoever the note taker is, specifically written in there, that this has happened or this has transpired, and that the chairperson has allowed for this to happen. However, they can't vote on anything. They can't be, they're not allowed to be part of the actual motioning of something. So that's a key thing that everyone watching this needs to know when it comes to observers. And it's part of your Robert's rules as well. Now, identifying what's wrong with these minutes. So these are just examples of screenshots I've found along the way of like meeting minutes that I've found. So as you can see in this one, like the first one, it's basically literally it's a real meeting minutes of an AGM. Something as important as this, you can't write it like that. Best practice would be to follow our templates, which I've shown you as photos from previous slides. But basically, you can't write 2024 11 12. Like, do we know if that's the 12th of November or whether that's the 11th of December? Like, depends on what stuff it is, but like you can't write it like that. And look, first names as well. You need to have full names, not just first names, and you need to write down your observers if there were any, absentees, and apologies. You've also got like parties and websites. Like, those are things that you need to minute properly. Ideally, they should be in an appendix. So like parties and website, the way they were written sounds like a report, which if you're gonna, it's better to write in as an attachment of an appendix, and then with that stuff, you just need to write it in the, like, let's say if this was a subcommittee report, you need to do it in dot points and you need to make it really concise. The rest of the report, if everyone else is interested in reading it, you could, like the original document, it's better to attach it as an appendix, and you need to specifically minute in your meeting minutes to say that it's an appendix. Otherwise, you run the risk of like having something really long and big. And also because of the first person wording in there as well. So you've also got like this, for example, like this is from like uh, a like a fake society thing. I kind of had to change some of the wording just to hide for clarity purposes. So name change. Like look at this. You may have noticed our name is TU Pink Flamingo Society is now a bit misrepresented what we actually do, and therefore I would like to move the change. Like you need to write it as instead of like this, you need to say the state the society has like I guess the chair has motioned to move to change the name of the society to this, and then you need to write, is the motion carried? Who abstained? Who voted against? You can write your reasoning on a dot point, or you could write it. You could attach it as an appendix. That way, you're making everything concise but still delivering the reasoning. So that way, someone who reads it externally could understand why this was motion. What's the reasoning behind the motion? Otherwise, they did it correctly in a way of saying yays, nays, or abstaining because they actually reported numbers. Um, so that's what it is. Like, and you try to make it formal and concise. With this one, the voting system, um, look, you need to have like full names, and also you can see here president, secretary, treasurer, vice president, event coordinator, and general member. Like they've only invited, at least from I can tell here, they've only voting system. They've only invited the committee. They didn't invite anyone else who's just a member, like just someone who rocks up and joins events. Like it needs to be everyone. You don't have to exactly put your reasoning here in your meeting minutes. You just need to have include in an appendix to make it concise. It can't be the last part of the document either. You need to have other business, and you need to have when did the meeting minutes finish, like when did the meeting finished, and like when the next meeting is. So like this document is all part of the same AGM. So on the top, you're missing location, you're missing time, you're missing the date, you're missing the name of the club, and the logo as well if you've got one. So that needs to be clearly included in there. Now with an AGM, like you've got the meeting minutes here. So this is another example of what we received. We just had to change the name just to hide like um, for yeah for privacy reasons. But yeah, this is pretty much like what we saw. So they didn't change. You need to change include the name of the society there. Um, and then change the red text or delete them if it's not uh, relevant, because these are instructions like capture the main points of the verbal points, like verbal report, like that's instructions that we have there. You're supposed to delete that, and then also delete the appendix if you're not going to attach anything. So that's pretty much it with the documents for an AGM. It's exactly the same with a special general meeting or a general meeting. That way, you need it to be really concise and you need to be really clear about what's included. But anything that's not necessary or anything that isn't necessarily required to be included in the main body of your meeting minutes, you include it in your appendix. And then make sure you actually mean it to say that the appendix is there. So you can find more of our information resources in our on our website under Community CNS Resources and Info Library, CNS meeting and agenda template or meeting minute keeping template. So you'll find that our templates there. Otherwise, Robert's Rules of Order, which is a thick book about how to run proper meeting minutes, like uh, general meetings or special general meetings, annual general meetings, that sort of thing, and what transpires in a meeting, what is and isn't allowed. They also have a website now, so you could look up specific things like how do you, could you run a circular motion? Could you run this, and all that sort of stuff? And um, they'll browse through and then they could tell you whether it's allowed under Robert's Rules of Order or not. Otherwise, if you've got any other questions, you can email us at clubs@tusa.utas.edu.au. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for coming or for watching this. If you're watching this recording in the future, we'll see you at the Student Leaders Conference on the 18th and 19th of November. It's going to be a full 2-day workshop. So plus a lot of fun other things, including like the Clubs and Societies Awards night on the second day of the event as well, so 19th of November. But please do, with this one, we'll do more deep dives into other things, but also stuff that you need to know as a society. But we also talk about things outside of what we deliver in these executive workshops, because these are meant to just be complementary, but everything else is like, the stuff that we want you to know. So please mark that in your calendars. And yeah, we'll see you at the event. So I'll stop recording here.